Howdy folks, Spud here, and it is now Thursday in my series about a week in the life of a race team during the season. It's 2008 and Phoenix Racing has been getting ready for the Michigan race. I chose that Michigan race mostly because I've got really complete notes for that weekend. Yesterday we chassis dynoed the car and got it and everything else loaded up on the hauler so that our truck driver, Tony Sessions, could get to heading on up to Michigan International Speedway. Figuring what time he left the shop, I'd say he made about 5 3/4 to 6 hours or so up the road to, say, Lexington, Kentucky, before he decided to pull over for the night. He would have gotten an early start this morning and should be at the track with a couple of hours to spare. According to the schedule, the haulers go in at 3 p.m. this afternoon. I had mentioned in the Wednesday video Tony's love of ketchup and how he would smother everything he ate with the stuff. I gotta be honest, it would not have surprised me in the least if he'd had one of them plastic 1-gallon ice cream pails full of ketchup packets in the truck and would just keep reaching in and grabbing one, tearing the end off and squirting it into his mouth. What they had, all hauler drivers are at least a half a bubble out of plum, and I guess this would have beat driving under the influence or tearing everything up in the hauler. Next, let's take a look at Phoenix Racing's road crew from 2008. First, there was Mark Reno, who ran the place. He was the big kahuna, numero uno, the tip of the spear, top of the pyramid. Mark is one of the smartest guys I've ever met. He's forgotten more than I'll ever know about racing. He's got a remarkable engineering mind and is a hell of a fabricator to boot. I want to show you some pictures of Mark's incredible fabrication skills. Here's a 46 Chevy pickup that he built. Check out that crazy sick front suspension that Mark designed and fabbed for this project. The rear suspension that he built for this truck was just as cool as the front. It wasn't just a matter of slapping a couple of leaf springs and a 12-bolt under the rear frame, I'll tell you. Mark is a smart man. When our shop was still down in Panama City, Florida, Timmy Hammer was our shop foreman. Yeah, he was also Mark's attack dog. If you fabbed a part for the car, it had to pass Timmy's muster before the car would get rolled from the fab shop to the plate. If Timmy thought your part looked like something that fell out of a tall cow's ass, he'd let you know in no uncertain terms that you were going to redo it until it was right. And trust me, it was better that Timmy chewed your ass than Mark to see it on the setup plate and make a special trip out to the fab shop just to see you. We Phoenix Racing guys were kind of notorious for finding all different kinds of ways of getting into mischief. I mean, out at the track, away from the track, back at the shop, and definitely during our free time. I'm sure that Mark would deny this vehemently, but he was, and for that matter still is, the straw that stirred the drink. Next up would be Nick Harrison. Mark promoted him from car chief to crew chief, and he certainly deserved it. Nick was a racer's racer and another fellow with a very creative, albeit naughty, mind when it came to the cars and their preparation. Nick had grown up with Sterling Marlin in his gang and was almost like an adopted son. Nick thought Sterling hung the moon and that the only reason he didn't walk on water was because Sterling didn't like wet shoes. Nick was a fun-loving guy who loved a cold beer after work, and he loved to tease. Our office was right next to each other, and if he needed something, he'd call me on the phone's intercom because he knew I had no idea how to work all the buttons on that sucker. I'd yell at him to just holler the question. I could hear him fine through the wall. next thing I'd hear was him laughing, his big, wonderful laugh. Nick was all racer and all heart. He was one of my best friends, and I miss him every day. Our car chief in 2008 was Jason McDowell. J-Mac is another racer's racer, and he's a hell of a hard worker to boot. If we had damage during a race, J-Mac was the one to throw on a helmet and sub in for another pit crew member, usually me because I was the gas man, and go over the wall and try and make repairs. J-Mac is just a great all-around guy. On a travel day, if we had to go to the track for tech, we'd usually hit a fast food place on the way to the track. I remember J-Mac spent that whole year there in 2008 asking why we couldn't get a real sit-down dinner instead. We finally did that and hit a Cracker Barrel before going to the track in Texas, and I've never forgotten him wearing our waitress out with, "What a man gotta do to get a biscuit around here?" There was another thing about J-Mac that I teased on him pretty hard about. If a reporter was interviewing Mark or Nick, J-Mac would invariably somehow end up in the background in the picture or video. He wasn't intentionally trying to photobomb, it just happened. But that still didn't stop me from making up some pictures commemorating J-Mac's brushes with great moments in history. Here's a picture of J-Mac with his racing buddies Cale Yarborough and Donnie Allison at Daytona one year. Next up is J-Mac getting a limo ride in downtown Dallas. And finally, here's a picture of J-Mac at what became known as the last sit-down dinner. I wasn't there in 2012 when Phoenix Racing won the Xfinity Daytona race with Kurt Busch. But J-Mac sure was, and he doesn't let me forget it. When I moved back to South Carolina in 2018, I stayed at his place for a week while I was doing some work on the interior of the Spud Shack before I moved back in. When I first arrived at his house, I opened up the front door only to find his 2.5 foot tall Daytona trophy blocking my way at the foot of his stairs. Subtle J-Mac, really subtle. J-Mac lives about an hour down the road from me in Easley. He bought Lindsay McClure's ring and pinion business a few years back, and he's expanded it to include J-Mac fabrication and suspension. And every time I talk to him, he is just swamped with work. But I figure that's what happens when you combine a really great work ethic with quality work. I'm awful proud of J-Mac and his success. Tristan Smith was the other engineer at Phoenix Racing that season. I'd talked to Mark Reno into stealing Tristan away from Ricky Pearson. Tristan and I shared the duties on breaking down the tire data from Goodyear and running the pull-down machine and pretty much everything else as far as that kind of deal there. Tristan would also go out and help set the car up. And one great thing about him was that he was not afraid to throw down and get dirty working on the car. I've met some kids who think having an engineering degree makes them too good to work on a race car. And the poor schmucks don't seem to realize that getting your hands dirty only deepens your understanding about how everything works. A lot of these guys don't seem to have gotten their starts Saturday night racing, and I think it's to their detriment. Tristan had a killer sense of humor and did a spot-on impersonation of Mark Reno. Actually, he had several spot-on imitations of several guys on the team. He later went to JR Motorsports, and he's been with JTG Daugherty for several years now. He's got himself a Daytona 500 win, too, the Fargan Bastage. He's also got a closet full of cowboy boots. By the way, Tristan is also a Clemson alum, and so he's always had this sad inferiority complex about me and my beloved Boise State Broncos. Next up is our shock specialist from that season, Herb Englehart. Herb has been around racing his whole life. His dad, Billy Englehart, was a hell of a dirt racer. He raced in USAC National Midget Series, the USAC National Silver Crown Series, and also raced Indy cars in kart in 1980 and 81, including the 1980 Indy 500. He had 4 top 10s even. I loved talking to Billy, and I gotta admit I was a little jealous of Herbie's childhood. Herb would spend the bulk of his week back at the shop building 8 to 10 sets of shocks, and that's 4 shocks per set, so you can see that he was a pretty busy beaver. But that would pay off at the track. During practice, if we had a handling issue that we thought the shocks might solve, if he was asked, Herb would always say, I got a couple of options that should help fix that. Herb is back home in Indianapolis, and he's the sales manager for PWR Advanced Cooling. They build top quality radiators, oil coolers, and intercoolers, and are pretty much an industry standard in NASCAR. They also serve IndyCar, IMSA, and the NHRA. I always look forward to racing at Indy because Herb and I would usually be able to get together for dinner. Before I let Herbie go, I gotta tell you a little story. This little incident took quite a bit of planning on my part, but it was sure worth it. You know how you can assign a specific sound to when you click your mouse buttons on Windows? Well, we were doing a test at Charlotte, and Herb was out in the car in the garage. I quick got onto his laptop in the hauler, downloaded an MP3, and made it so that whenever he left-clicked the mouse, the computer would start playing It's Raining Men. I could see him walking back to the hauler, so I quick ran to the back and just kind of hung around outside the door. It wasn't but maybe 30 seconds before I heard, "Hi, we're your weather girls, and have we got news for you?" Followed by Herb loudly saying, "What the fruck? What the fruck?" He'd keep re-clicking on his program, and it was, "Hi, we're your weather girls. What the fruck? What the fruck?" I almost drew blood on my knuckles. I was biting them so hard. Joey Register was our longtime tire specialist after we moved the shop up from Panama City to Spartanburg. Joey was old school all the way. He's about 3 years older than me. He'd been in racing forever, and he had spent a healthy part of his career working for Bud Moore. Now, Bud Moore he was born and lived and died right here in Spartanburg. That man, he went ashore on Utah Beach on D-Day, June 6, 1944, fought his way across Europe and into Germany and Czechoslovakia, and he was a hero and genuine badass. He got the Bronze Star twice and 5 Purple Hearts. Joey had a big old heart and a ready smile, but he could be a little bit gruff every now and again, and I think that's why he and I got along, because I have a reputation of being a curmudgeon, don't you know? When it came to the long van rides to a track like Daytona, Joey would end up usually doing the bulk of the driving. As far as, like on the road, normally I usually rode with him and Eddie Pearson in their rental car. I preferred the dignified clip in that car compared to the elbows up, fangs out pace that some of my other teammates, and I'm talking to you, Chuck Myers, would scorch along at. Chuck could actually make me car sick on the interstate in a straight line. Well, what he considered a straight line. Before I talk about the rest of the road crew guys, you may have noticed that I've had a truck driving down the road in the background. I tried as best I could to recreate our hauler driver Tony Sessions' route from the shop up to Michigan. I'm using the old truck simulator, 18 Wheels of Steel, Long Haul America. Never been able to get American Truck Simulator up and running. I happen to come up pretty dumb when it comes to installing stuff from Steam. Mock me, if you will. I had to fudge the route some on account of what's available on 18 Wheels of Steel's map, which means I actually started in Atlanta and ended up in a parking lot in Detroit. What you'll see in the background from here on in, though, is our flight on Flight Simulator 2004 from Spartanburg downtown airport to Willow Run Airport up in Ypsilanti. I still much prefer Flight Simulator 2004 to FSX or even FS 2020. Excuse me. More on all that later, though. The next fellow in our police lineup is Eddie Pearson. That's David Pearson's boy. He's the youngest of the three brothers, Larry, Ricky, and Eddie. He was one of our mechanics on the road crew. Eddie was a fun-loving guy who enjoyed the nightlife and loved to mingle with the little people, but he was always bright-eyed and bushy-tailed when it came time to leave for the track. His dad, David, was and still is my favorite NASCAR driver. To me, David is NASCAR's true GOAT. I ain't one to fawn over a driver. None of us at Phoenix Racing were. But when David would come to the shop, I'd end up blushing and giggling like a schoolgirl and looking down at my feet. I could hardly put a sentence together when talking to him. He's the one driver where I got carried away with hero worship. Here's Josh May. He was one of our mechanics. Josh was a real good guy, full of mischief, and he had a very quick wit. If he felt compelled to respond to something that one of us said, he'd get this twinkle in his eye, and you just knew that whatever he was fixing to say was going to draw blood. Josh was a good-looking kid, was fun-loving, and enjoyed the nightlife and perhaps having a drink or two. Not anymore, though. He's a family man now. He has a beautiful wife and little girls, and is living the whole suburban white picket fence kind of lifestyle. Like myself, he said adios to Jack Daniels and Jim Beam and Jose Cuervo and all them other fellas a while back. Every now and again, a bunch of us Phoenix Racing guys get together for dinner, and I'm just tickled pink to see Josh every time. Let me tell you a little story about Josh. We were racing out in Las Vegas one year and figuring to head down to test at Phoenix the following couple days after the race. We were all down in the lobby of the hotel on Sunday morning, and there was no Josh May and no J-Mac. Well, Herb shows up and informs us that they got arrested the night before. So Mark and I climb in a rental, and we find a bail bondsman and make bail for the two of them. We couldn't wait any longer, so we all loaded up and headed to Phoenix. J-Mac and Josh showed up several hours later, and oh my, J-Mac looked fine, but Josh looked like he was talking when he should have been listening. Big old black eye, cuts, the whole 9 yards. Seems the two of them had caught a taxi down to the Strip, and the cabbie took great issue with Josh lighting up a cigarette in his cab and stopped and demanded they exit. The argument kind of spilled to the outside of the taxi, and the next thing you know, a plainclothes cop comes out of nowhere and takes down Josh from behind. And then a bunch of cops suddenly appear out of nowhere too. Poor J-Mac got arrested for just being there and asking the cops to quit beating the hell out of Josh. It was typical Phoenix racing. James didn't pay bonuses, he paid bail. Carmen Jaquez worked in the fab shop, back at the shop, but he kind of filled in wherever at the track. He had served in the Marine Corps and was a tough little bird, but he was a nice guy nonetheless. Carmen was physically the smallest guy on the road crew, which meant if something needed to be done inside the car, he'd get tagged for that duty most of the time. One of his responsibilities back at the shop was to make up side skirts, and I did tend to wear him out some on that because I always had some difficulties getting him to bolt onto the car. I've lost touch with him, but I heard a rumor that he went back into the service. I think that's admirable. That leaves us with Josh Slater. Josh effing Slater. None of us called him Josh. He was just Slater. Slater was a super nice kid with a ready smile and would work his ass off. He was maybe a little on the naive side though. I remember we were pulling a car down that had a coil bind set up on it, and with the car pulled down to load, we'd oftentimes slide a piece of paper between the coils to find out if and where they were touching. I was on the right side and called out to Nick that I could slide a dollar bill in between all the coils, which made sense because we were running a left side coil bind setup. Well, Slater called out that he was using a $5 bill and couldn't get it in between the coils at all. So I got up and walked over to that side of the car and said, "Well, of course you can't. You're using a $5, and that's 5 times as thick as a $1 bill." And Slater said, "Really?" I said, "Hell yeah, you fold that $5 bill in half and then do that again a couple of times, and you're never going to be able to get your wallet into your back pocket." The look on his face let me know he wasn't sure if I was funning him or not. Slater and I have got a favorite shared memory, and it has to do with coming back from a Daytona race one year. We had 2 team vans, which meant we weren't too crowded for the long drive back. Well, Slater wanted to stick around for the Sunday race, so he took off back to the hotel after our race, which meant now the whole road crew, minus Slater, was crammed into one van for the drive home. I called him up on the phone when I found out about this and told him to get his damn ass back in the van, and we'd meet him at the freeway on-ramp. And then, miraculously, the phone went dead in my ear, and he would not answer when I called back. I told the other guys to let him know that we would settle this back at the shop on Monday. Well, Slater, he laid awful low on Monday and avoided me like the plague. I'm pretty sure he thought I was fixing to hang a physical licking on him. Finally, I went out in the shop and tracked him down late in the afternoon and told him to come with me to my office. And he followed behind me, looking like a little puppy who got caught peeing on a carpet. I'm going to let you in on a little secret, though. My bark is actually way worse than my bite. So I sat behind my desk, and he sat in a chair on the other side, and I gave him what for a while. And then I reached down. You see, I'd run down to the store at lunch and bought a 6-pack of beers. I told him, okay, this is all behind us, and we're still buddies. And I set the beers down on the desk. And wouldn't you know, somehow I'd screwed up and bought them little beers that come in a bottle the size of a baby food jar. We still giggle about it, but it didn't stop us from drinking the beers. Last time I saw Slater was at Nick's funeral in 2019, but we talk on the phone with some regularity. Next time he's up this way, I'm certain a bunch of us Phoenix guys will get together for one of our dinners. Our itinerary says that we took off from Concord Airport at 12:45 in the afternoon, which would have given each of us a few hours that morning to do a little house cleaning, or maybe get a quick haircut, or any of the other things that road crew guys are always hard-pressed to get done given our weekly schedule. Now I'm going to change things up a little bit here. When James bought our shop in Spartanburg from Buckshot Jones's dad Billy, he also bought their Beechcraft King Air 350, and for a couple of years we got to fly out of Spartanburg downtown Memorial Airport, which was maybe 15 minutes from the shop. It was wonderful, and I've decided we're going to fly out of KSPA on the King Air instead of driving up to Concord for the charter flight. Not how things actually went down in 2008, but it's my video and I'm doing what I want. KSPA opened in 1927, and it served as a training facility for the Army Air Corps during World War II. The terminal building was actually built in 1936, and it has some pretty cool memorabilia on display in the lobby. We're taking off on runway 5 today, and if we were to look off to our left as we climb out, you're going to see the Denny's corporate headquarters building, which is the tallest building in downtown Spartanburg. At night, on the flight home, the flashing red beacon on the top of that building would not only let us know we were minutes from landing, but would also give us an indication of where we were in relation to the airport. Now, if we stay on that runway heading after takeoff, we'd fly right over my house, the Tater Shack. But we're going to veer just a little bit to the left and follow a course of 355 degrees for a direct flight up to KYIP, which is Willow Run Airport near Ypsilanti. I want to talk a bit about the King Air as we make our way north on the hour-and-a-half flight up to Michigan. I've had the good fortune to fly on quite a few King Airs, both the Model 200 and the 350, as well as the 1900, which is a regional airliner that was developed from the King Air. The King Air is one heck of an aircraft and was pretty popular for a while with several of the smaller teams, until charters like Race Day in the mid to late 2000s and the present day Victory Air and Champion Air up out of Statesville really got rolling. It's just plain more affordable to buy seats for your guys on those charters than to cover the cost of leasing or maintaining an aircraft full time. Anyway, the King Air is a very nice airplane that has room for a crew of 2 and space for 9 to 11 passengers. Its cruise speed is around 310 knots, and it's got a range of some 1,400 nautical miles. Ours had a glass cockpit mixed in with some analog gauges, and I normally sat in the co-pilot seat, and boy did I learn a lot about radio traffic and navigation on those flights. I also learned the art of being able to hold a conversation and yet be able to recognize when air traffic control was trying to communicate with us. I never got to fly the King Air, although I do have 2.5 hours in a Piper Navajo in my logbook from a test we did down in Lakeland, Florida back in 2000. Our pilot, who was also a licensed flight instructor, gave me a lesson on the flight home from the test. I'd never flown a twin before, and I am proud to say I absolutely greased the landing back at Panama City. I also got to fly James's Cessna Citation on a flight home from Talladega to Panama City. But that one didn't go quite as smoothly. We were IFR, and normally you just let the autopilot do the bulk of the flying. But I did it all manually. The takeoff and the climb out were fine, but when it came time to level out, I was a bit ham-fisted with the yoke and overcorrecting as I chased the altimeter in trying to maintain that plus or minus 100 feet for our assigned altitude. It was bad enough to where poor Matt Hutter had to put down his book. He was getting a little nauseated. Nobody realized that I was the one flying and thought our pilot, Larry Mack, must be hammer drunk. Honestly though, what do I care? It was jet time, which was also a first for me. I have decided to condense this flight some. I don't think anybody wants to sit here for an hour and a half flight going on in the background, or to listen to me talk for that long. Sorry to say. So let's just say we're getting close to KYIP. Willow Run Airport is steeped in history. It's where Ford built its plant for building the B-24 Liberator during World War II. Henry Ford had actually bought the property in 1931 and had a farm on it where they were teaching inner city kids about farming and nature and stuff like that. But in 1941, Ford was contracted to begin building the consolidated B-24 under license, and built the Willow Run plant, which covers a whopping 65 acres. It was considered the biggest factory under one roof in the world at the time. The Liberator still holds the record as the most produced heavy bomber and U.S. military aircraft in history. Between Consolidated, Douglas, North American, and Ford, over 18,500 Liberators were built during the war, with Ford building over 4,600 of them. In fact, Ford ended up producing one B-24 an hour. They were making them faster than the military was using them. As an aside, the Willow Run Airport is now also home to the Yankee Air Museum, which is located in part of the Willow Run bomber plant. And it is really worth a visit if you get up there Ypsilanti way. Okay, so we'd hang a left out of the airport right onto Highway 12 and commence to digging. We'd travel through Saline, or Saline, however they want to say it, and Clinton until we finally saw our accommodations on the left. And of course I'm talking about the world famous Cowboy Creek Lodge. The place reminded me of those theme hotels you used to see on Route 66. Some folks may have thought it was a little hokey, but we all loved it. The rooms were done up in a Western motif. Your towel racks were made out of horseshoes, and there were only 2 channels on the TV, which really didn't matter because the reception was nothing but snow. In the evening, the guy who looked after the place would start a fire in the fire pit for us, and the guys would settle down and toast marshmallows and sip on Jack Daniels while they played poker. And with it being the guys from Phoenix Racing, I can assure you that the game was totally above ground with no cheating whatsoever. Right across the street from the hotel was Randy's Roadside Barbecue, and oh my, was the food good. I loved the ribs. I still treasure my Randy's t-shirt and break it out every now and again for special occasions, like when us Phoenix guys get together for dinner. Randy's has since located up the road maybe a half a mile or so, and it's got a totally different ambiance, but you still can't beat their food. So that's what our travel day would have been like. And it's time to lay our heads on the pillow and get what sleep we can before we head to the track in the morning for tech inspection, practice, and happy hour. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I'll see you soon in my next one, which will be about Friday. Godspeed, and God bless our country.